course, with the government of the country affected. But there is a fundamental issue that there's a lot of organizations involved in this. That has the advantage of diversity, it has a disadvantage of fragmentation. But that's a fundamental problem which we can't really do anything about. What we have to do is make sure it's as well coordinated and effective as we can make it.
Well, I'm going to ask you all to stand by. We have to take a very short break here. When we return, we look at the potential consequences if the international community fails to act quickly and effectively enough for Pakistan. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Homeless, hungry and miserable. That's the plight of millions of survivors from Pakistan's worst natural disaster in history. Yet the world seems to have been slow to react, and that's put enormous pressure on the nation's struggling economy. What are the consequences if the world fails Pakistan? Well, joining me is Sir John Holmes, the outgoing United Nations Emergency Relief Coordinator. It's one of his last interviews before he steps down on Thursday, so we're glad to have him. Pakistani journalist and blogger Musharraf Zaidi, who writes a weekly column for the Pakistani newspaper, The News, and Kulsum Lakhani, who's raising money for flood victims through her website, reliefforpakistan.com. Now, as I get back to questions, Musharraf Zaidi, if I could put this email to you that came in from Amira Khalid in the UAE. She says, people are reluctant to donate because Pakistani politicians will benefit and the money may not reach the victims. Additionally, Pakistan is portrayed as a terrorist harboring nation in the media. Well, of course, we've covered that aspect, but in terms of the idea of corruption, to what degree is the history of corruption that Pakistan is plagued with a problem in this? And what has the Pakistani government done positively to make sure things are going more smoothly in this disaster relief?
Well, just to deal with the issue of corruption first off, corruption is a big problem in all developing countries, and I think that the idea that the only way to help Pakistan is to hand money to the Pakistani government is absolutely false. A lot of I would say a majority of the support that's come in so far for these victims of these floods has been money that's been going to NGOs, both international NGOs like Oxfam and Save the Children, Islamic Relief, and Pakistani NGOs like the Eidhi Foundation, organizations like the one that Kulsum is working with, Mercy Corps, the TCF, the Citizens Foundation Relief Effort, Karachi Relief Trust. So there's hundreds of Pakistani and international NGOs that have very good and robust financial systems that ensure accountability and that ensure that this money won't go into the bank accounts of the rich and famous, within Pakistan's political space. So that's the issue with corruption. There's a separate thing which has to do with this growing and very sort of firm narrative about Pakistan as a very negative place, a dangerous place, and a totally dysfunctional place. And that, I think, is, at least on the operational side, is slightly misplaced, because as a matter of fact, when you go into the flood-affected areas and you look at, for example, where people have set up their support camps, invariably you find these set up at public schools, at government-built schools. So, we talk about this failing state, a state that's crumbling. Well, while everything else crumbled as these floods took so many lives and livelihoods with them, the Pakistani government schools were still standing. Okay. If you look at sort of some of the actions that were undertaken by the provincial government in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa immediately after the floods, you have notifications that are up on the internet for everyone to have a look at, that were telling people where to go, where the flood relief camps will be set up, and how food will be provided to them. Okay. I think what everyone forgets when we're talking about Pakistan, because of the kind of coverage that exists about Pakistan, is that the nature of this catastrophe was so deep, it was so bad, it was so unprecedented, that any government would have had difficulty in dealing with it. So I'm not saying that the Pakistani government has dealt with it perfectly, but it's done what a government should have done.
All right, well, Kulsum Lakhani, to follow up on that before I take a couple of calls, Anisa Nazir wrote in saying, developed countries need to help Pakistan create irrigation systems, bridges, and allocate land back to its people instead of throwing money at its unreliable government. Of course, in raising money here, you face that kind of perception. Let me ask you how you track, or at least make sure, the money is going to the right place and that you're not duplicating other efforts.
Right. Well, basically, the reason we decided to do Relief for Pakistan was a lot of what Musharraf was talking about was that the money is actually going to reputable agencies, but so many of us, Pakistani Peace Builders, our company, ML Resources Social Vision, and the volunteers others that were part of this team, we all had been receiving emails from people with very similar concerns that, well, where is the money going? How do we know that it's going to the right place? So we decided to vet and choose a relief agency that we felt was reputable in the United States among American donors, but still was working with local organizations in Pakistan, was coordinating emergency first response relief very efficiently on the ground, as Mercy Corps is doing, and that's the reason we decided to choose Mercy Corps. And so I think as a result, there's that level of transparency that we're able to provide, especially through the use of social media, which has really been the way we've created this grassroots campaign.
It's worked well. Yeah. Well, let's get a call in from Tanzania. Bilal, thank you very much for your patience. Go ahead with your question, please.
Hello,
Hi.
how are you, Mr. Lee?
Very good, thanks. Thanks for joining us. What would you like to ask?
I would like to ask is that Pakistan is one of the in Organization of Islamic Organization Committee, and then why these Muslim countries are not helping Pakistan as much as countries like Britain and America, they help
Okay,
Pakistan.
Bilal, I'll put
Whereas
that...
these Muslim countries not help, why they don't
Right.
help Pakistan.
Bilal, I'll put this to Sir John Holmes, and Sir John, if I could also add to this, an email we got from through Facebook from Wasim Akran, who wrote in saying, how come the oil-rich Arab countries have not given much aid? Now, is that the case? Because I know often there is a perception that, especially the Muslim world, does try to rise up to the occasion when it comes to dealing with Muslim countries, which of course Pakistan is.
I think people are making a very fair point that the majority of the aid has been coming from the normal Western donors, and the US and the UK have been very much in the lead of that. Of course, there are contributions, and in some cases very significant contributions from some of the Organization of the Islamic Conference countries as well. Saudi Arabia has donated, I believe, $100 million in kind. Unfortunately, these countries do not donate through the multilateral channels through us. They very often do it bilaterally, which is much harder to track and much harder to be clear about where the money's actually gone. But it's also true that there are other governments who've contributed relatively small amounts considering their prosperity, and they might be considered to have a greater degree of solidarity with their Muslim brothers, and that's one of the reasons we are appealing to GCC countries and other Muslim countries to step up further and look at leaving aside all these issues of image and so on and corruption. And I agree with what others have said about the money reaching the reputable organizations, whether the UN organizations like the World Food Programme, UNHCR, UNICEF, the World Health Organization, or the big NGOs. But leaving aside all that, what we're talking about is individual tragedies of individual innocent people who need help. Whatever the problems of the government may be, these are individuals who are suffering loss of virtually everything they had, and they need the help from all quarters, including from other Muslim countries.
Well, Pasir has been very patient waiting in the UK to ask a question. Thank you, Pasir. Go ahead.
Hello, hi, Riz. I just really want to, it's actually just an echo to the question you had on earlier regarding the issue of money. That's not going to actually go to the poor or the needy. It's actually going to go, obviously, to the top-notch. The other thing is that I believe that the world is so slow in responding. It's actually because, obviously, our president is probably going to put the money in his pocket.
Okay. Basir, well, we touched on the issue of where the money goes, but a quick thought, Musharraf Zaidi, if I could ask you, there's the issue of what happens from here now as well, because it's farmland that's been devastated, it's the livelihoods of people, so we're actually going to end up with a very long-term problem, aren't we? It's not just what happens now and the potential of disease, which could actually take so many more lives, but also what happens in terms of recovery when it comes to rejuvenating the farmlands and getting those back up and running as well.
Yeah, I think that, organizations like the UN system and the different agencies within the UN, the different NGOs, both Pakistani and international, that are working on this, really only have a fundamental and useful role in the relief and the recovery aspects, which is sort of short medium term. So it's basically about saving lives, it's about saving children from disease, it's about getting shelter over people's heads. That's the kind of thing that the international community can help with, and they can do it without the fear of President Zardari siphoning off any of this money, because you just go and give the money to Sir John Holmes, who has a system that you can trust. Yeah. That's the relief and the recovery aspect. What the government of Pakistan is doing right now, and has been doing since the foreign minister was in New York last week, is trying to now collect money for the reconstruction aspect, which is a much more long-term project, and which will require not hundreds of millions, but many billions. And it's something that's going to go on for not sort of months or years, but maybe decades.
Okay.
And I think that's the part of the equation that
Well, I'm sorry, no, the reason I have to stop you there is because we've run out of time with our satellite link up and the end of the show has come. I thank you very much. Sir John Holmes, thank you very much, sir, as well for being with us. Kulsoom, good luck with everything with the fundraising as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for being with us. Remember, you can follow our program on Twitter. We'll keep you notified on upcoming shows and you can send us questions and comments to pose to our guests on the next show. 5 years after the devastating floods of Hurricane Katrina that nearly destroyed New Orleans, how much is life back to normal? In his latest documentary, actor Harry Shearer criticizes the poor infrastructure that caused the levees to break and checks if the rebuilding is being done correctly this time around. Join us for that from me and the team. See you next time.